Today, we're talking about cover your tracks culture and why employees stop speaking up at work. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Megan Wollerton. I own Life Force Wellness, and I'm certified in a bunch of different health and wellness topics, including personal training, health coaching, nutrition coaching, corporate wellness. And I've also studied a lot as far as mental health. So I am a positive psychology practitioner, stress management, sleep and recovery coach, and recently obtained my advanced certificate in change psychology because I believe that we need to really tackle stress in the workplace from two different angles. We need to work with the employees and educate them on how they can boost their own health and well being. But we also need to work with leadership so that they understand some of the things that they may do in the workplace that causes the stress and the burnout. And that's what we're here to really talk about today. So I wonder how many of you have ever worked somewhere where you felt like people were keeping the receipts, right? They were over documenting everything. They were constantly pointing the finger. Nobody wanted to be blamed for anything. Mistakes were hidden. People stayed quiet in meetings. They were afraid to speak up for fear of ridicule. And a lot of us have tried in leadership to tackle these problems head on by forcing everyone to speak up. We're going to go around the room and make everyone share an idea. Or we try to shine a light on mistakes. Or we try to tell everyone, like, hey, you don't need to document this. We're automating it. AI is a big tool now. And what we need to understand is that when we have a workplace where people are doing these types of behaviors, they're not the problem. They're the symptom to a much deeper problem. And this is a problem I'm very familiar with. So before I ever got into health and wellness, I actually worked in the oil and gas field industry. I worked in it for about 6 years, and most of that time was spent at one particular company where the owner of the company did not see mistakes as human errors, mistakes, teachable moments. He saw them as betrayals. And if you made a mistake, your head was on the chopping block. And it was a very toxic work environment. And it was almost like playing that game of Survivor. So, if any of you have seen the reality TV show Survivor, I always equated working there to playing that game because there'd be one week where you'd have to build an alliance with somebody. It would be nothing for me to go with Kevin to the boss's office and hype Kevin up. Oh, Kevin's the best employee we have here. He's got this great idea. It's going to help increase productivity. And Kevin would go out and he'd start doing some things. And maybe like 2 weeks later, Kevin would mess something up. And I'd go to the boss and be like, oh, Kevin's the worst employee. Why do we have him here? I mean, you'd have to make and break alliances super quick. I'd be making alliance then with Johnny. Oh, that Kevin, he's crazy. I've been talking to Johnny. I didn't realize Kevin was, not really with it. His ideas weren't that hot. And it was an ugly environment. I mean, throwing people under the bus, constantly blaming the shift. People didn't want to take ownership or responsibility for anything. And it created what I now call a cover your tracks culture. Maybe you've heard of CYA. I've also heard somebody say shelter your donkey, which I thought was kind of clever. And I want you to think about any time you were in an environment where you felt like you really had to cover your tracks. And I know there are three big behaviors that come out of this type of culture. And I was really guilty of this first one, and that was withholding information. So when I first started my job, my grandmother, who's of the traditional generation, who did work, which was rare for women in her age group and in her generation to work, but she worked, and her advice to me was don't give out all the information. Hang on to some important pieces just for yourself. That way, they can't fire you because they need you because you're the only person that knows how to do that thing. And so I learned to withhold information. And I'll admit, there were three separate occasions when my boss hired somebody in for the sole purpose of replacing me. Like he interviewed them without my knowledge and told them, my goal is to get you up to speed so I can fire Megan because he and I, attitudes wise, personality wise, did not mesh. And all three times, those people after 90 days or 180 days would go to him and say, we can't fire Megan. She knows too much. She's the only one who knows how to do this or that. She's the only one who knows where this information is, or all that information's in her head. It's not written down anywhere. We can't let her go. She's too valuable. Great. I created job security for myself in a toxic work environment. What I also did was create an environment where I couldn't take a day off. There was one year my husband and I decided to take a trip out west. So we're from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we're taking this road trip. We're going to go down to St. Louis, through Kansas, into Colorado, up to Devil's Tower in Wyoming, into South Dakota to the Badlands, and then back home. Big trip, right? Going across almost the entire United States. We're going to try to do it in a week in our Nissan Altima. We're on a lot of back roads, not really good cell signal, and I'm getting calls from the office because there's problems that nobody else knows how to solve because I had withheld that information for myself. So it wasn't healthy for the company, but it also wasn't healthy for me because I couldn't take a day off because I'm the only one who knew how to fix the problem. So here I am on back roads, cutting in and out of service, trying to solve issues across the country. The second issue that I see comes up is nobody wants to take ownership for anything. As soon as a task comes in, it gets passed off to somebody else and they pass it off. And then when the whole thing blows up or a mistake gets made, we all start pointing the finger. Well, I gave it to Kevin. Kevin gave it to John. John gave it to Tara. And who's actually responsible for this? Who's being held accountable for this? You don't know. And the last one, I was also very guilty of over documenting. And I mean, it's one thing, especially for anyone in HR, you got to document. There's certain compliance and safety things. We need documentation, but this is excessive. This is taking away from productivity. This is causing burnout. In my example, there were very few days that I actually left the office before 10 or 11 p.m. because I would do my job from about 8 a.m. until about 6 p.m. And then I would sit down and document everything I did. And then I would sit there and write about everything that was going to happen. So I would be at my computer writing all the things I did. And then I would type up the schedule for what was going on first thing in the morning. So Jimmy and John are taking truck 715 to this drill site at these GPS coordinates to fulfill these orders with these POs, with these ticket numbers. These are the vendors that will meet them on site, all the information in one place. And it would take me almost 2 hours to fully document that. And I would send that email to everyone in the company every night before I left. And I did that for years. And wouldn't you know it, one particular day, I was on a drill site doing an inspection with one of my coordinators, and the boss is just blowing up my phone. And you're not always allowed to answer your cell phone on a drill site, there's only certain designated areas. And I had my phone in that designated area doing my inspection. I come back. I have like 10 missed calls. I call him back and he just lays into me. I mean, screaming at me. Where are you? I'm on the side of the road. I'm trying to find this drill site. I don't know where I'm going. And I said, it was in the email. I sent it to you. I sent it to your assistant. It went to everyone in the company. I'm not seeing your email. I mean, flipped out on me. When I got off that call, I turned to my coordinator and said, you're probably going to have to drive the truck back to the shop because I'm pretty sure I'm out of a job. About an hour later, the boss rolls up onto the drill site. He comes up to me, and all he said was, I found the email. And he turned around and walked away. Not an apology, not anything. It was basically like, your butt's been saved because I found the email. And because of that experience, I made sure to document everything because it was that email that saved me from getting fired that day. And that was the type of culture this owner was creating. It was extremely toxic. And one of the things we have to keep in mind is that when we see employees doing these behaviors, withholding information, pointing the blame, not taking ownership, over documenting, understand it's coming from a place of them trying to protect themselves. This means you have a culture rooted with fear, a lack of trust, inconsistent leadership. There are unclear expectations for your employees, or maybe they have negative past experiences. Now, I know for me personally, when I left that job, that's when I made the transition from being in the corporate environment to the wellness environment. I take the experiences I had from my corporate life and I now bring them in with my business with all the things I know in health and wellness. But I could totally see where I would take some of those negative experiences into the next job. that I might go to a new company and still over document or withhold information because it's just a bad habit I picked up from a previous employer. And so sometimes it's not even the culture you have, but it's the people that you're hiring bringing that into your culture. And what we need to recognize is that when employees aren't taking accountability, when they're not speaking up, when there's that silence, we need to recognize that it's not disengagement. I get a lot of calls from leaders and people in HR. Our people aren't engaged. They're not being innovative. They're not speaking up. We're trying to create a psychologically safe experience for them, but they're in self-protection mode. So they're not necessarily disengaged. It's not an employee engagement problem. It's a stress and threat problem. The cost of this silence and these behaviors is immense. When employees don't feel like they can speak up, when they don't feel like they can raise their hand and say, hey, I need help or I made a mistake, problems go underground. Mistakes get hidden. I like to use the analogy of like when a mistake is made, it's almost like that lasagna you keep pushing to the back of the fridge. And maybe it's like, I just don't want to deal with this right now. But then, like, you find it a month later and it's like growing a whole new civilization. And not only do you have to throw the lasagna away, you have to throw the container away because you don't think you can salvage it. That's what happens. When your employees aren't willing to speak up, they'll sweep those mistakes under the rug and they start to fester and they become much bigger issues. The other thing we see is innovation decreases. I'm not going to take a risk to develop something new if it blows up in my face and you don't approve of mistakes, or this is an environment where I feel comfortable saying that I've made a mistake. I'm not going to take the risk to be innovative. Communication suffers overall because we're just not being open and honest with each other, which then erodes the trust, and accountability weakens. How do you even do a performance evaluation when you're not holding people accountable, when they're constantly pointing the finger at others? And there's a lot of statistics and a few studies that have been done behind this. So Gallup did a study and they found that 3 in 10 US employees strongly agree that their opinions count at work. So that means 7 out of 10 employees don't think that they're being heard. They don't think their opinions really matter. And what they found is if you could get that to double, if 6 out of 10 employees felt like their opinions mattered, there was a 27% reduction in turnover, a 40% reduction in safety incidents. And coming from a place like oil and gas, working with a lot of manufacturing and construction companies, I will tell you probably the most mistakes that get swept under the rugs are things around health and safety. It's the near misses that were supposed to be documented that never got documented because the paperwork process, or I don't want to admit that I messed up and almost tripped on that thing. And so when we are willing to speak up and say those things, I can absolutely see how that improved the safety incidents. There was also a 12% increase in productivity. And this isn't something that just affects the US. Globally, 1 in 4 employees strongly agree their opinion counts at work. That means that most employees do not feel comfortable in sharing their concerns, sharing ideas, innovating, giving feedback. So it doesn't matter how many employee engagement surveys you send out, your employees don't really feel like they're being heard. That's why you're getting low records back. And part of this is because our employees are in survival mode. We want to create cultures where they have a thriving brain. When our brains feel like we are in threat, when we are in fear, when we are in frustration, we're not feeling heard, our prefrontal cortex actually starts to shut down. And our brain goes from thriving mode, that complex decision making and problem solving, to just trying to survive and get by. And so we as leaders need to understand that we're not just managing people, we are managing their entire nervous system with the culture that we are creating. And part of that is recognizing when our employees are stressing out because it shows up differently. There are 4 primary stress responses. 2 of them you probably already know very well: fight or flight. We'll frequently discuss stress and going into fight or flight mode. Fight mode is when we want to confront the threat head on. And this is what I used to do with my old boss, which is why he didn't like me. He and I would get into shouting matches. It wasn't pretty. I was immature. He was not a good leader, and it just led to a lot of clashes. And that did show up as anger, irritability, lashing out. It came as this need to control everything. There was verbal or physical aggression or passive aggressiveness. So when those passive aggressive emails get sent, understand it's coming out of a place of stress and somebody's in fight mode. Their internal message is screaming, if you just fight hard enough, you'll survive. The other side of this is flight. This is about escaping or avoiding the danger. It looks like anxiety or panic. This also shows up as that overworking and over planning. So if you have that employee that has plan A, B, C, D, all the way to like double G, that might be them in flight mode. Like you might be looking and be like, oh, they're an overthinker, they're an over planner. Why are they over planning? Why are they overthinking this? Is it coming from a place of just they want to be proactive? Or is it coming from a place of fear? We need to, as leaders, know our people and have those conversations to determine that. They also might avoid confrontation altogether. These are the people that will sit out on the meeting, stay quiet. Maybe they won't jump in on the Zoom calls. And their internal message is if I run fast enough, I'll be safe. The next two that you might not be as familiar with is freeze and fawn. So freeze, we've all done. You know, somebody drops a glass and we all have that little intake and we all freeze and we go, what was that? Oh, if somebody dropped a glass, no big deal. We move on. It's this idea of playing dead or becoming unnoticeable. We see this in extreme cases. You know, people ask victims, why didn't you fight back? Well, because they were in freeze mode. They couldn't make a decision. They didn't know, do I scream? Do I fight? Do I just play along? What do I do in this situation? It's so extreme they can't make up their mind. And so we see this in the workplace with those employees that have a hard time making decisions. They're so scared of making the wrong decision, they don't make any decisions. And this can also then form as procrastination. So you might be thinking, oh, these employees, they keep procrastinating, they don't have time management, they don't have good motivation. Could be it could also be a stress response that they pull out that project to work on and they go, I don't even know where to start. I'm not really sure what's needed here. And they start freaking out and that stress builds up and then they just push it off because their internal message is if I don't move, if I don't act, the danger will pass. Maybe if I just don't do anything, they'll forget about it and I won't be in any trouble. The last one is fawn. And this one I actually see the most, but it's talked about the least. This is about appeasing the threat to avoid harm. So this shows up as people pleasing. Those people in your company that say yes to everything, are they saying yes because they're eager to learn and grow and they want opportunities to, develop their skills? Or are they saying yes because they're afraid of the consequences of what comes from telling you no? Like, ooh, if I turn down this project, are they going to pass me up for that promotion? Will I not look like a team player if I say no? I might as well just say yes. And you can tell because they tend to put others ahead of themselves. You can see the burnout, you can see the stress, and yet they still keep taking on more. This is somebody who's in fawning. And I just wrote an article that went on LinkedIn today that kind of talks a little bit more about fawning and understanding the difference of somebody who says yes out of true, good, intentional motivation and somebody who says yes out of fear and an intimidation. Their internal message is if I can just keep everyone happy, I will stay safe. So now that we understand those four stress responses, we need to understand what causes these stress responses. And you may have come to some of my other workshops where we dove really deep into the SCARF model. This was developed by Dr. David Rock. He's a neuroscientist that really kind of determined the five main social stress triggers that we have. And they are status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. When we trigger one of these five, it puts us into survival mode. It puts us into threat mode. It will trigger that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. As a quick breakdown, S stands for status. Do your people feel respected, competent, and valued? If they don't, you're triggering stress. Certainty. Do I know what's expected or what's coming next? Autonomy. Do I have control over how I do my work? This is where a lot of conflict comes with that return to office. Are you returning me to the office so we can collaborate better? Or are you returning me to the office so you can look over my shoulder and micromanage me? The next is relatedness. Do I feel like I belong? Like I'm really part of this team, or am I just trying to fit in? And fairness. Am I being treated justly? And is everyone treated consistently here? If any of those get triggered, it puts your people into that survival mode and they'll start to develop the habits that create that cover your tracks kind of culture. And so leadership needs to understand that their behavior impacts how the employees perceive the culture, how they are triggered. Whenever we give inconsistent feedback, something I'm seeing showing up is talking to employees and saying, I did these jobs. My boss told me, good job, high five, whatever. And then 6 months later at my performance evaluations, I got like poor review. Like, where did that come from? For the longest time, they told me I was doing a good job. They never said anything to me. And now I'm sitting down for my performance evaluation. I'm expecting a good raise or bonus, but my evaluation was poor. There's inconsistency in the feedback they're getting. The second is public correction. Nobody should be standing on public trial in your office. You should praise your people in public, but when you need to correct their behavior, or you need to discuss with them some disciplinary thing, it should be done in private. It should not be done in public. Micromanagement, you hired your people for a reason. They had skills and abilities. You sifted through hundreds of resumes to find that one ideal candidate. Let them do their job. Let them shine. Let them bring that skill to the table. Don't micromanage them. When there's lack of follow through, one of the biggest things I see with the lack of follow through is when we do put out those employee surveys and people give their opinion, their feedback, and then nothing ever comes of it. I've talked to employees that are like, oh, yeah, every year my employer sends out this survey. I have filled it out every year and I've never seen a change happen from it. There's no follow through, there's no communication about what's going on with those results. So then it becomes, what's the point of filling them out? What's the point of speaking up? We're also seeing playing favorites, especially in these hybrid work environments. There's a lot of research showing that the people that are coming into the office more frequently have a little bit of favoritism with their bosses because they're interacting with their bosses face to face more. They're developing a deeper connection versus those that are more virtual. They're not getting maybe the same benefits, they're not developing the same relationships with their bosses. And so we need to be mindful about that favoritism to the people that maybe we see and interact with more than those we don't, or the tenured employee, the employee that's been here for 3 to 5 years versus the newbie. And lastly, punishing mistakes. Absolutely. If an employee does something that's really heinous, we need to like bring that up, right? Certain mistakes should have certain punishments. But there are times where employees make mistakes and it's human error, and we need to really treat them as teachable moments, right? I used to have a manager who said, you can make mistakes, but I don't want you to make the same mistake twice. Because once you make this mistake, I'm going to pull you to the side and I'm going to retrain you. And you're going to sign off that you understand. You're going to have all the freedom to ask whatever questions you want. But if you make that mistake a second time, now we have a problem because we've already discussed this, we've already retrained on it. So making sure that mistakes can be trainable moments. Many leaders are creating kind of this fear unintentionally because they are playing favorites and they don't recognize it, or they're not being consistent with their feedback, or maybe they are saying things in meetings that are inappropriate that should be done in private. And so just being mindful of these types of behaviors is going to help create a better, healthier culture. Now, let's say something happens, like maybe you already recognize, oops, I messed up. I'm guilty of this. I did something. Maybe I've broken trust with my employees. How do I repair this? How do I fix this culture? Create clarity. Just be clear. What are the expectations? What do you want your employees to get out of this? Where are we headed in the future? As much clarity and transparency you can give them is going to help repair that trust. Follow through. If you say you're going to do something, follow through with it. Get those survey results. Say, here's what we're seeing based on the survey results, and here's what we plan on doing. Here's the next action we're going to take. Just don't leave things hanging in the abyss. Address issues quickly, just like that lasagna analogy. Don't push it to the back of the fridge and let it fester. Don't go to an employee and say, well, over the last 6 months, I've been seeing you make the same mistake. Why didn't you come to me 6 months ago? If I made a mistake today, tell me about it today, in today's call, in yesterday's meeting. Address it as quickly as possible. Invite questions. In your meeting, something as simple as, okay, I'm going to give this team a project, and then I want you to go around the table and I want everyone to ask a question. Even if you already know the answer to it, just ask a question. I want to make sure everyone asks at least one question because even you asking a question might make somebody else think of another question they didn't think that they needed to have answered at the moment. Forcing everyone to ask a question, it brings everyone to the table, everyone's asking, and it creates a safe space to open up that discussion. Reward speaking up. When somebody raises their hand, says, hey, there's a problem. Hey, I need help. Hey, I made a mistake. Reward that. Hey, thanks for your honesty. I appreciate you bringing this to our attention so we could, correct it more efficiently. Reward that. Also, respond to mistakes calmly. Again, treat them as teachable moments. And trust is built through consistency. You can't be calm about a mistake today and then blow up about it tomorrow. There needs to be consistency in all things. It's doing these habits day in and day out. And if you truly mess up, I encourage you to follow these three steps: name it, own it, and reset it. So I myself had a little bit of an issue last week. I was speaking at the SHRM National Convention and I was doing a presentation and I was diving deep into that SCARF model and discussing how one of the ways we trigger status is when we talk to people in a condescending way or we talk down to them. And I made a comment about, for any of us who ever worked retail or in fast food, you know what I'm talking about. I want to speak to your manager, get me someone who actually works here. We commonly refer to them as Karens. And I got a little chuckle and I made a joke about how my mother in law's name is Karen. And I think that that's hysterical. Well, wouldn't you know it, there was somebody on the virtual call whose name was Karen. And she was deeply offended that I used her name in a derogatory way. And so I found who she was, went on to LinkedIn, and I did this process. I said, hey, in my presentation, I used Karen as a derogatory tone. And that was not right. I take responsibility for that. I shouldn't have done that. That was insensitive of me. Moving forward, I'm not going to use that as an example. I'll be sure to refrain from using it in that way. We don't try to justify it. I don't go, oh, it was a slip of the tongue. It was just a little mistake. Or, oh, I was running on low sleep. So what? Anytime I'm running on low sleep, I can be insensitive. Oh, so just because it was a slip of the tongue, it was okay. Do not try to justify it. Just own it. It was wrong of me. It was wrong. I like to say it's the Taylor Swift protocol. It's me. Hello, I'm the problem. It's me. So just own it and then tell them what you're going to do moving forward so that they know you're not going to do this again. That's how we rebuild that trust. So, some of the key takeaways I want you to have today: silence and disengagement are frequently a sign of self protection, that there's some level of fear. It might be with a coworker who's bullying them, it might be a manager, but sometimes that disengagement you're seeing or that lack of motivation is actually coming out of a place of self protection. Covering your tracks cultures often are built through fear, uncertainty, and inconsistent leadership. The SCARF threats influence workplace behavior. Understanding that SCARF model and social threats and training your leadership on them is a good way so that they can be more mindful about how they're acting, how they're giving instruction. And trust is built through consistency. It has to be something you practice day in and day out. And you, as leaders, can reduce defensiveness and increase ownership based on how you're communicating to your people, what kind of culture you're creating so that they can actually dive in and not be afraid to raise their hand. We are almost at time, and I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. I saw the chat light up. If you want to go deeper into any of this, if you're like, Megan, tell me more, please feel free to book a call with me. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Or if you're like, hey, this is something I think would be helpful for my leaders, I would love to bring this to them. If you are interested in our next workshop, I am doing free weekly 30-minute webinars and they alternate between wellness topics. So my next one next week is on halt before eating. You're welcome to attend. My next free leadership webinar is more than just busy. It's about helping teams perform without burning out. So busy does not always equal productive. I used to have a manager that trained me on how to look busy, but I was not productive at all. So, how do we actually get our employees to become more productive without burning themselves out? We're going to talk a little bit about energy management versus time management. And at this time, I'm happy to take any questions. If you'd like to, please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I promote any future webinars and give free resources, write articles. You're welcome to dive into those. Well, if there's no other questions, and I hope that helped, I will let you guys get on with the rest of your day. Hopefully, I'll see you in 1 or 2 weeks for the next session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.